Hey everybody, welcome back to another deep dive. Today we are talking all about something that's super important for anyone who's working with OSHA regulations. And of course, we're going to do it with the help of our friends over at Safety One Source.
Absolutely.
We are going to figure out which industries are required to electronically submit injury and illness data to OSHA. And this is according to Appendix B of Subpart E of Part 1904.
Yeah.
That's a lot, I know.
It is.
But this is important information.
It is.
And we are going to make it as interesting and as clear as we can, I promise.
Absolutely. And to do that, we're going to look at what OSHA's saying, and we're also going to bring in some insights from Safety One Source.
Okay, so, I was looking at this list of industries, and to be honest, some of them were really surprising to me. Like performing arts companies.
Really?
Yeah, and spectator sports, too. Those don't really sound like, high-risk workplaces to me.
Yeah, it's easy to kind of just assume things, right? But OSHA uses a very specific system to actually categorize industries.
Okay.
And that's where NAICS codes come in.
Okay, wait. NAICS codes. I've never even heard of that before.
NAICS stands for North American Industry Classification System.
All right.
And essentially, they classify businesses by their industry, and OSHA uses those in Appendix B to say which businesses with 100 or more employees have to submit those injury and illness reports electronically. We're talking OSHA Forms 300 and 301.
Okay, so step one, you got to know what your NAICS code is.
Yep.
Then if you've got over 100 employees and your industry is on the list, boom, you're going to send OSHA that electronic data every year.
That is exactly right. And what I think is so fascinating is that this lets OSHA move beyond just reacting to incidents,
Right.
They can actually look at the data, see the trends, and figure out where they should prioritize resources and even, develop ways to intervene for certain industries or certain types of hazards.
So it's like taking all those individual reports and then stepping back and using them to see the big picture of safety across entire industries.
Right.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, but let's dive in a little bit more here. What are some of the big industry categories we are dealing with?
Well, we've got everything from, the ones you'd expect, like agriculture, forestry, fishing, and hunting. That's NAICS Code 11, by the way, to manufacturing, which covers NAICS codes 31 through 33. And then we've got transportation and warehousing. That's NAICS 48 and 49.
And then we've got healthcare and social assistance, which, you think would be all about safety, but it really has its own risks.
Absolutely. And then even arts, entertainment, and recreation is on here, too. That's NAICS 71.
Right, like we were saying.
Yeah. And then to round out the list, we've got accommodation and food services. That's NAICS 72.
Okay, so we've got all these industries, but to really understand how big this is, let's look at some specifics.
Sure.
So under manufacturing, we see a whole range. You've got beverage manufacturing, you've got plastics, product manufacturing.
And you can't forget motor vehicle manufacturing.
Yeah, exactly. It really shows how OSHA is trying to get data from all different types of workplaces to get a real sense of safety across the whole country.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of industries. But I'm curious, why is OSHA collecting all of this data? Some people might think this is just a bunch of bureaucracy.
Well, I'd say this data is really, really important for understanding where the biggest risks are, where we should focus our resources, and even, what kind of training or regulations we need.
Okay, so it's not just about checking boxes.
No.
It's about actually using this information to make workplaces safer all over.
Exactly. And I think it's about moving towards this proactive, data-driven approach to safety.
Okay.
And that has implications for how all of us think about risk in our specific industries.
Right now, if anyone's listening and thinking, wait a minute, does my business even fall under this Appendix B? Well, that's the first thing you got to figure out. If you've got 100 or more employees and your industry's on that list, you've got a legal obligation to submit your data.
You do, and you don't want to mess around with that either, because if you don't comply, OSHA can hit you with some pretty hefty fines.
Okay, so this is serious business.
It is.
So let's dive into some of these industries.
Okay.
Let's start with the first one. Agriculture, forestry, fishing, and hunting, NAICS Code 11. What are some of the things that stand out to you about this category?
Well, this is a sector that has some of the highest fatality rates in any industry in the U.S. I mean, it's really risky work. It often involves, heavy machinery. You're out in the elements, and it's physically demanding.
Yeah, you're just talking about everything from growing crops and raising animals to logging and fishing.
Right.
So it's not a surprise that OSHA data shows this sector as high risk.
Yeah, and it's interesting, too, that even the things that support those industries are included in Appendix B.
Like what?
Like support activities for crop production or support activities for animal production.
Okay, so OSHA really thinks about all the different parts of these industries.
It's not just the people on the front lines, it's everyone involved in making those industries work.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Now let's move on to manufacturing.
Okay.
We mentioned this one earlier. This covers NAICS codes 31 through 33.
Right.
And we talked about beverage manufacturing, plastics, product manufacturing, and motor vehicle manufacturing. But there's also food production and textile mills and chemical manufacturing. The list just goes on and on.
And that's where you really start to see the importance of this. Manufacturing is a huge industry. But some of the common themes are things like automation, chemical hazards, and a lot of times working with heavy machinery. So your risk assessments, you have to account for all of that.
Yeah, so you can't have a one-size-fits-all approach to safety in manufacturing. You have to be specific about the hazards in each place.
Exactly. And that's where a resource like Safety OneSource can be so helpful. You know, they have experts in different industries, and they can help you figure out a safety program that works for your specific situation.
Yeah, I mean, having that kind of help makes a huge difference when you're trying to understand OSHA and how to keep people safe.
For sure.
So should we move on to transportation and warehousing now?
Yeah, let's do it. That's NAICS codes 48 and 49, and this one's got everything from trucking to air transportation to rail and even pipelines.
And don't forget about warehousing and storage. That's been growing so much lately with all the online shopping and everything needing to be shipped all over the place.
Yeah, you're right. The logistics and transportation industries are dealing with some really unique challenges right now. You know, everyone wants their stuff delivered fast, and there's more and more stuff to move around.
Yeah.
And that can lead to worker fatigue and people working longer hours, which makes accidents more likely.
Plus, you've got all the different vehicles and equipment that can be dangerous. You've got trucks that could get in accidents, people getting hurt, loading and unloading things in warehouses, and then people falling from heights in shipping yards. Yeah. It's a lot to think about.
It really is, and it's an industry that's changing all the time, which means your safety procedures have to keep up with those changes too.
All right, let's shift gears again and talk about healthcare and social assistance.
Right.
We've got hospitals and nursing homes, outpatient clinics, social service agencies. It's a really broad category.
Yeah, and even though it's all about taking care of people, it's not without its risks. Healthcare workers have to worry about getting sick from diseases, they have to worry about injuries from moving patients around, and they can even get hurt by needles or other sharp objects.
And then there's the emotional side of the job, too. Taking care of people, especially in stressful situations, can lead to burnout and compassion fatigue.
Yeah.
Something we don't always talk about, but it's a real risk for these workers.
Yeah, for sure. So for organizations in this category, it's really important to think about the well-being of their staff just as much as they think about the safety of their patients.
Absolutely.
You know, they need to have the right training, the right equipment, and even support systems to help them deal with the emotional stress of the job.
Okay, so it's about taking a holistic approach to safety.
Exactly.
Now, this next one is a little different. Let's talk about arts, entertainment, and recreation. I know it's on the list, but it's still a little surprising to me.
Yeah, you wouldn't necessarily think of museums and amusement parks and those kinds of places as high-risk workplaces. But remember, OSHA is looking at data, and they've clearly found that there are injuries and illnesses happening in these industries.
Okay, so what kind of hazards are we talking about here?
Well, in a museum, you could always slip and fall in an amusement park. People can get hurt on the rides. And even in the performing arts, there are risks from the equipment they use on stage, like the lights and rigging, even the costumes and props, can be dangerous if you don't handle them right.
Wow. Okay, so the lesson here is that hazards can be anywhere.
Yeah, you really have to pay attention to your surroundings and take precautions to prevent accidents.
Okay, good advice. All right, last category on our list is accommodation and food services.
Yes, this is another big one with everything from hotels and restaurants to bars and catering. And a lot of times you'll see younger and less experienced workers in these jobs, which can lead to more injuries.
Right. And, you know, it's a fast-paced environment, especially in restaurants, and that can lead to all sorts of accidents, slips, trips, falls, burns, cuts, you name it.
And you also have to think about food safety and handling and all the cleaning chemicals they use.
So training is really important here.
It is. You have to make sure everyone knows the safety procedures and has the right tools for the job.
And again, this is where Safety OneSource comes in. They can help you design a training program that meets your specific needs and make sure your team has what they need to work safely and efficiently.
Absolutely.
Okay, wow. We've covered a lot here, but it's important to remember this is just a quick look. If you work in safety or risk management, you need to go to OSHA's website And look at the whole list and check out resources like Safety One Source for more guidance.
Yes, they can give you more detailed information about each industry and the rules that apply.
Exactly. And trust me, you don't want to be caught off guard when it comes to OSHA. They mean business.
Yeah, the fines can be pretty serious, but even more important, you don't want to put your workers at risk.
That's right. Safety should always be the top priority.
Absolutely. And, this Appendix B list, it's not set in stone. It changes as OSHA gets more data and sees new trends, so you got to stay up to date.
Yeah, for sure. You don't want to be working with old information. It's interesting, though, how this list really shows how work is changing in general. Like, you see industries like waste collection and treatment, which is becoming more and more important as we think about sustainability.
Yeah. And direct selling establishments, too. That's interesting because it shows the growth of the gig economy and all those independent contractors out there.
Right. It makes you realize that safety isn't just about, traditional workplaces anymore. It's everywhere. So if we think about the big picture, what does this Appendix B tell us about what OSHA is focusing on these days?
I think it shows they're really committed to using data to make decisions. By collecting all this data from all these different industries, they can really get a handle on where they need to focus resources and come up with ways to make things safer.
So it's like they're trying to be more proactive instead of just waiting for something bad to happen and then reacting.
Exactly. Now I know what you might be thinking. What if my industry isn't even on this list? Does that mean I can just forget about OSHA?
Yeah, that's a good question. What's the answer?
Well, even if your industry isn't on Appendix B, you still have to follow OSHA's general industry standards. Those apply to pretty much everyone.
Okay, so no free passes just because you're not on the high-risk list. Everyone has to create a safe workplace.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that Appendix B is really focused on businesses with 100 or more employees. So if you're smaller, you might not have to send in all that data electronically, but you still have to keep records of injuries and illnesses. OSHA can still ask to see them.
Okay, so we know that knowing about Appendix B is important, but what are some things safety professionals can do to make sure they're following the rules? Where do you even start?
Well, the first thing is to take a good look at that list, see if your business is actually on it. And once you've done that, you need to really understand what the rules are for sending in your data electronically. OSHA has all that on their website.
And this is where a resource like Safety One Source can be a lifesaver. They can explain everything in plain English and make sure you understand what to do.
Exactly. They have so many resources that can help you with that electronic submission process and make sure you're sending in the right information the right way.
Okay, so be proactive and be informed.
Yes.
But let's shift gears for a minute and talk about the people involved in all of this. I mean, we've been talking about rules and data and forms, but this is really about keeping people safe.
Absolutely. You're right. Data is important, but it's only one part of the story. We can't forget that behind every number is a person who got hurt or got sick at work.
And those injuries and illnesses, they affect families and communities too.
They do. And that's why, as safety professionals, we have to do more than just check boxes and file paperwork. We need to create a real culture of safety in our workplaces.
Okay, so how do you actually do that? What does that look like?
It means getting employees involved in discussions about safety, encouraging them to report hazards, and giving them the training and resources they need to work safely. It's about giving them a voice.
It's about making sure everyone feels comfortable talking about safety concerns without being afraid to get in trouble.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that safety is everyone's responsibility from the top to the bottom.
I like that it's about creating a shared commitment to looking out for each other.
Right now, there are a few more things I think are important to mention. One is that even within a specific industry, not every single business has to send in data electronically. There are some exceptions.
So it's not always black and white.
Right. Like some businesses might be partially exempt if they only do certain things that aren't considered high risk.
So you really have to look at the details of the rules and maybe even get some help from a place like Safety One Source to figure out what you need to do.
Absolutely. Another thing to emphasize is how important it is for your data to be accurate. When you're sending information to OSHA, it has to be right.
Yeah. Otherwise, it could mess things up and lead to bad decisions.
Exactly. If the data isn't accurate, it's harder to see trends and figure out the best ways to improve safety. So it's really important to get it right.
So what can businesses do to make sure their data is accurate? How do you avoid making mistakes?
First, you need to have clear written procedures for how you record and report injuries and illnesses. Every employee needs to understand what they need to do, and they need access to the right forms and resources.
And it's really helpful to have a system for checking the data before you send it to OSHA. Having someone else look at it can catch errors before they become a problem.
Exactly. Double checking is always a good idea. Now, let's talk about the benefits of submitting your data electronically. It's not just about following the rules.
Okay, what makes it so great?
Well, for one thing, it makes things easier for everyone, both for employers and for OSHA. You don't have to mess around with paper forms and typing everything in manually.
Ah, the joys of technology.
Right. It's faster, it's more efficient, and there are fewer mistakes.
And I bet it makes the data a lot easier to use for analysis and research.
That's another big advantage. OSHA can easily use the data to track trends, identify high-risk industries, and come up with better ways to make workplaces safer.
And on the other side, employers can use the data to see how they're doing compared to other businesses in their industry. It's a great way to figure out what you need to improve.
It really is. It's a valuable tool for making things safer all the time. But let's not forget, OSHA sets the rules and gives us guidance. But it's up to employers and employees to work together to make sure everyone is safe.
Right. It's about taking responsibility for safety and going beyond just the minimum requirements.
Exactly. It's about being proactive, finding those potential hazards, figuring out how to control them, and creating that culture of safety we were talking about.
Making safety a core value in your company.
Exactly. Right now, going back to Appendix B, there are a couple of things I want our listeners to keep in mind about this list.
Okay. What else should we know? Tell us.
So the industries on this list, they're the ones that OSHA has found have higher than average rates of injuries and illnesses. That's why they're on the list in the first place.
It's basically a warning sign that these industries need to pay extra attention to safety.
Exactly. And because the list is based on real data and research, it's a reflection of the real risks out there.
So it's not just a random list of industries. There's a reason behind it.
Precisely. And remember, Appendix B is just one part of being compliant with OSHA. There are a lot of other rules and standards that you need to know about.
Right. So don't just stop at Appendix B. Do your homework and make sure you understand everything OSHA requires.
Exactly. And those requirements can change depending on your specific industry and the type of work you do.
So it can get pretty complicated.
It can, but that's where resources like Safety OneSource can be so helpful. They can help you figure out all the details of OSHA compliance and make sure you're doing everything right.
Yeah, they offer expert advice, training materials, and even tools and templates to make everything easier and less stressful.
Exactly. Now, how about we talk about technology and how it's changing workplace safety?
Yeah, that's a big topic these days. Everyone's talking about AI and automation.
And for good reason, technology is becoming more and more important for finding hazards, preventing accidents, and making workplaces safer.
Yeah, like think about wearable sensors that can tell if a worker's getting tired or if they're in a position that could hurt them.
Right, or drones that can inspect places that are hard to reach so workers don't have to put themselves in danger.
And what about AI? I've heard it can analyze data and find patterns that might show a safety risk.
It's pretty amazing. The possibilities are endless.
But it's important to remember that technology is just a tool, right? It can't replace human judgment and a good safety culture.
I completely agree. Technology can help us, but it can't do everything. We still need trained safety professionals to look at the data, make decisions, and put safety measures in place.
Yeah.
And we need workers who are engaged and committed to working safely.
Right. Technology can be a powerful tool for making workplaces safer, but we have to use it the right way. And always remember that people are the most important part of the equation.
I agree with that. Okay, so technology is changing things, but so is the COVID-19 pandemic. I think that's had a huge impact on workplace safety, too.
Yeah, absolutely. The pandemic made businesses rethink everything about safety, especially how to protect workers from the virus.
Right. We saw new rules being put in place, like wearing masks, social distancing, and more cleaning and sanitizing.
And a lot of businesses had to start having people work from home and have more flexible schedules, which came with their own safety challenges.
Yeah, the pandemic really sped up the use of technology in the workplace, even for safety.
Right, like we saw a lot more virtual training, online safety meetings, and digital tools for reporting hazards and communicating about safety.
Yeah, and I think some of these changes are here to stay even after the pandemic is over.
I think so too. The pandemic forced us to be more adaptable, more creative, and more proactive about safety. And it showed us how important collaboration and communication are for creating a safe and healthy workplace.
Definitely. So we've talked about the big changes, but what are some of the specific things that safety professionals are struggling with right now in this world that's changing so fast? What's keeping you up at night?
I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, one of the biggest challenges is just trying to keep up with all the new technology. It's a field that's changing so quickly, and it can be hard to stay on top of all the new tools and solutions.
Yeah, it can feel overwhelming sometimes. Where do you even begin?
Right, and then you have to figure out which technologies are actually going to work for your specific situation and how to use them effectively. It's not as easy as just buying the newest gadget.
You need a plan. And then there's the challenge of dealing with workplaces that are becoming more and more complex.
That's a big one with globalization, automation. Workplaces are more diverse and connected than ever before.
And that creates new safety risks that need new solutions.
Exactly. Safety professionals have to be flexible and creative to deal with these changing risks.
They have to be problem solvers. And then there's the challenge of creating that strong safety culture we talked about.
Yeah.
But in a work environment where people are working in different locations.
That's a tough one. When you have employees working from home or on different schedules, it's harder to make sure everyone is getting the same message about safety and that everyone feels connected to the company's safety goals.
It means you have to find new ways to communicate, train, and keep people engaged. You can't just rely on the old ways of doing things.
Exactly. And it means focusing on building trust and accountability even when everyone isn't in the same place.
Okay, so there are definitely some challenges, but I think safety professionals are up to the task. They're a resourceful group.
I agree. We have a lot of talented and dedicated people who are passionate about keeping workers safe and creating safer workplaces.
And we have so many resources and technologies to help us achieve those goals. You know, it's incredible when you think about how much work has changed, even just in the last few years, and with all these changes happening, it seems like being a safety professional is more important than ever.
Oh, I completely agree. The days of just waiting for something to go wrong and then dealing with it, those are over today's safety professionals. They have to be proactive. They got to use data and they got to be looking ahead all the time to see what risks might be coming.
So it's kind of like you're a detective and a fortune teller all rolled into one, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You got to figure out what happened in the past. You got to understand what's happening now. And you got to be ready for whatever might happen next.
Right. And that's where really understanding this Appendix B and all the industries on it, that's really valuable. It shows you where OSHA is focusing and it gives you a sense of what's happening in the world of workplace safety.
Yeah. And as we've been talking about resources like Safety One Source, they can give you that extra help and expertise.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's helping you understand the rules or creating training programs or just keeping up with the latest safety technology, they're a huge help for anyone working in safety.
Absolutely. And I think the big takeaway here is that workplace safety, it's not just a one-time thing, it's a journey.
Yeah.
It's a process of constantly learning, adapting, and getting better.
And it's a journey we're all on together. So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's remember safety is not just about checking boxes or following rules. It's about building a culture where everyone feels valued and protected and where they can do their best work without putting themselves or anyone else in danger.
Really well said. And to all our listeners out there, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you learned something and that it got you thinking. Remember, stay curious, stay engaged, and stay safe.